Not long after the discovery of these humans did we find ourselves dealing with an existential threat. This threat being our neighbors the other sector over, which was the Voran. The Voran decided that, well, we needed to be removed from this sector so they could take it over. Obviously, we're not going to do that, but we were not equipped with enough people, enough of our own personnel to take on the Voran. And then the Voran knew this, so they decided to come after us, even harder than we thought. Even though we put up a hard fight, it wasn't long before the Voran were on our own doorstep. In desperation, we had reached out to the humans, and we figured that they may be able to help. Maybe as dogs to scare away, to make enough noise to make the Voran slow down. Maybe even stop them, at least for a while, till we got ready to face the Voran again. To our surprise, humans, they served very well. They came up with ideas that we had never even conceived. And even though they insisted on using their small projectile weapons, or bringing back, as they said, the bigger guns, we didn't understand, but they were simply larger projectile weapons, and some even fired explosives. We didn't understand how this could go against the Voran, as the Voran's carapace was quite dense. We found out quickly that the explosive would actually cause the inside of the enemy to, well, liquefy. They, just like everything else, they needed hydration on the inside, even though their shell was hard. As it turned out, the projectile weapons did better than our energy weapons to actually punch through the shell, the carapace of the Voran. And once inside, it was almost impossible for their own doctors to remove said piece of inclined metal. If for some reason it became jagged, it would slowly tear them apart and they would die very, very slow and very painful unless they went through dangerous surgery to fix them. Along with this, the humans learned to set many traps and used explosives to their extremely high effectiveness. They were able to set up what they called these things called landmines and trick the Varan into following them. These mines were strong enough to blow an entire vehicle apart, sending many of them flying through the air. It was glorious. But the Varan did not stop. They realized that they were facing another type of enemy and came at with much more force. In many cases, they would come down with so many vehicles, so many personnel, that they simply would overrun a position, no matter what you threw at it. The humans, at one point, had to pull back from their position. They were told from their chain of command that they had to withdraw from their position. The word came out, "Fall back into the tree line." We didn't understand the significance of this. What if they could not hold in a prepared position? What would it matter that they went inside some sort of foliage? Though their clothing did seem to blend in quite well, the Varan could simply look for their heat signature, listen for their breathing. How could they possibly think that they could abandon their positions and do any type of damage? As they ran into the tree line, many of them fell as they made the quick run from their positions into the trees. And then they did something strange. They started zigzagging, as they called it, in some sort of serpentine pattern. It made it difficult for the Varan to actually find them in their sights, and when they did, many times the human was either not there, or they would simply bounce, ricochet, or strike a tree. Well, this did not stop the Varan, as they simply charged into the trees themselves, screaming in delight as they believed it would be a worthwhile hunt, and the humans would be a tasty snack after cutting through this many calories to hunt them down. Yet inside the forest, they did not know what was awaiting them. The Varan used their heat sensors, but they looked around, starting to hit their sensors. Something was wrong. They knew there was humans close. They could see them on the sensor array, but they couldn't find them. They looked and they could not see any humans anywhere in the foliage. They walked past some heat signatures but didn't see anything. They listened close and they did not even hear a human breathing. It was strange. Did the humans find a way to scramble any of their communications, to mess with any of their electronics? The Varan simply focused on us and started to move towards us. And before they knew what was going on, they were surrounded by humans jumping out of every single corner, coming out of the mud, seeming to fall out of trees on top of them, weapons first, driving their weapons straight into the creases in between the head and the carapace in many cases, and firing their projectile weapons, screaming and cursing their obscenities as they crashed into them, many of them coming up, firing until they had no projectiles left, and then simply using that weapon as a club. And when that failed, they would reach in and pull out their blades. As they did, they used the force to their advantage. The Varan were big, too big to move in this. As they would try to swing, strike at the humans, they would end up striking another tree. They couldn't rear their weapons back to strike with anything, as they would strike a branch, stopping their movement, and that sudden stop of movement was enough for the humans to make their move, going at the joints of the Varan and taking them down. Once on the ground, they were easy prey, and it would only take a few moments after that. The Varan were screaming in terror as they saw what seemed like humans coming out of nowhere. They realized that their systems had not malfunctioned, but the humans were actually there. They just couldn't find them. But what were they supposed to do? They ran back. Only 4 Varan out of an entire company was able to escape into the open woods. Only 2 made it back. 1 did not survive, as he had taken too many projectile hits through his carapace as he ran back over the open area. With that, the Varan fell back to one of their pets. As the humans told us, they sucked the dogs on us. Oh, that's a bad idea. With that, we did not understand. We realized that the humans had survived, but how? These beasts would come at you with all 8 legs, running at you with their fangs ready. No venom or poison, but they could easily tear a human apart if they wanted to. But it seemed like these things would stop and sniff the air, not realizing what was going on. They would again look back and forth, not seeing the human, but then they would follow the scent trail. And just as they would reach down with their nose, a hand would come up with a blade and shove it right through this thing's head. The Ganche is what they were called. And the Ganche did not leave that forest. The Varan were on the outside, hearing the screams and yelps and cries as they looked on in horror. They couldn't see what was going on, but they could sure hear it. They looked on their display for heat signatures, and they could see that they were all mixed in. And finally, another company showed up and simply stated that they will take out the humans for the honor of their home planet, and they ran towards the forest over that open field. And the one remaining from the first assault was screaming, "Don't follow them into the trees! Don't follow them into the trees!" This warning was not heeded. This was the first total victory against the Varan. The single survivor was sent back in shame and executed, as those in charge of him believed that he had simply fled in an act of cowardice. If they had listened, maybe more of them would be alive. As the humans became synonymous with this one simple rule: never, ever follow a human into the tree line.